I even came to my institution for that reason. I left an R1, heavily researched. I was in a school of medicine, and I came to Kennesaw State University, which had an R2 designation, and with the idea that I want to do research, but I really love teaching. I want to be able to do them both in a balanced way. Yeah. But then when I got to Kennesaw, I kind of just took off with the research. And I felt like my teaching was it was more about teaching research. And so now I'm sort of doing both in a more balanced way.
You just heard Ebony Glover from Kennesaw State University in Kennesaw, Georgia. Garth interviewed Ebony for episode 238 of Psych Sessions, Conversations about Teaching and Stuff.
MHS, a sponsor of Psych Sessions, is providing a free ADHD webinar. From one person to another, ADHD can look pretty different between youth and adults over the course of a lifespan. And our understanding of ADHD and the ways that we support people are evolving too. So join MHS for Unmasking ADHD, Practical Strategies to Empower Youth and Adults. This is a free webinar series upcoming for psychology students and faculty and school and clinical psychologists who want to better recognize ADHD. These sessions will explore executive function, the impact of ADHD across the lifespan, the overlap with autism, and the role of performance validity testing. You can hear from leading experts, including Dr. Jack Naglieri, Dr. Elizabeth Sparrow, Dr. Sam Goldstein, and Dr. Cecil Reynolds, as they share practical tools, real cases, and the latest research to support your studies or practice. So whether you're in the classroom or working in a clinic or just beginning a career, this series will equip you with strategies to make a meaningful difference. You can reserve your spot at mhs.com/ADHD-webinar-series-2025. That is mhs.com/ADHD-webinar-series-2025. And you can join a community committed to improving lives through a better understanding of ADHD. Psych Sessions is proud to partner with Macmillan Learning. At Macmillan Learning Psychology, content matters, and these days, digital content matters more than ever. Macmillan Learning's Achieve elevates interactive teaching and learning with an extraordinary range of online course content in a powerful yet easy-to-use platform. Interactive ebooks, innovative assessments, engaging videos and activities, helpful instructor resources. Achieve brings it all together and makes it easy for you to find what you need and what you want. See for yourself. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions for an introductory tour today. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning.
Hi, I'm Bridget Hard, a professor of the practice at Duke University. And I'm a member of STP because it is filled with an incredible community of people who really share my passion for teaching. For me, STP is home. It's a sense of family and friends, people who inspire me, people who give me lots of great ideas for all the different challenges that I face as a teacher. And this community is waiting for you. You can join STP at teachpsych.org.
Hi, folks. This is Garth, and I am here today with Ebony Glover, who is an associate professor of neuroscience at Kennesaw State University. Ebony, welcome.
Thank you.
And how long have you been in that position for?
Wow, that's a fun question because it just occurred to me yesterday that it's going on 11 years now, which seems impossible. I can't believe it happened that fast. Yes, I've been at Kennesaw for 11 years now.
Yeah. And how long kind of postgraduate work are you? How long have you been out of school for?
Oh gosh. So I earned my PhD in 2010.
Okay, 27.
And I did plenty of postdoctoral work. I did approximately 5+ years, some give or take. Did 2 postdoc separate positions, and then transitioned to my assistant professorship at Kennesaw.
Wow. Well, I want to get into all of that today. I first have to apologize to you because I had a very meaningful, quick conversation at NITOP with you a couple of years ago. And then we were emailing back and forth, and I was like, I can't wait to meet you. Sorry about that.
That was a whirlwind. That was my first NITOP.
Yeah.
So I was actually surprised that I remembered because I met so many people, but you're very hard to forget. And I had seen, or I had heard some of your other podcasts. So I was very excited to get this invitation, but I normally do not remember people that I meet in conferences like that. So no worries. No offense.
What are your home conferences? If that was your first NITOP, like what are your professional groups that you kind of show up to?
That's a great question. And that really gets to sort of my sort of background and experience in neuroscience. It's mostly in biomedical research. And so most of the conferences that I typically attend are Society for Neuroscience. And then I do, I enjoy smaller conferences like Social and Affective Neuroscience. There are, small conference like a conference on extinction, which is very behavioralist, mostly behavioral neuroscientists. So typically they're research focused conferences. I'm very new to the scholarship of teaching as a path towards sort of my research but I will tell you, going to a teaching conference was really life transformational. NITOP is hands down one of my favorite conferences that I've ever gone to. It's for so many reasons, but typically biomedical research conferences, but I'm really enjoying this space and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, welcome. If nobody's officially welcomed you to our little group. Yeah, this is something that people often share. I think people find meaning in their in other professional groups and conferences, but you often hear this sentiment that the teaching folks are just a little different somehow. How would you articulate that?
Oh, gosh. The first thing I would say is the teaching group, it's been my experience, they come with so much down-to-earth, open-minded curiosity. Everyone seems to approach every new person who's, entering the field with just open arms and highly supportive. There isn't a spirit of competitiveness. There isn't a spirit of, like hustle and like, grind. It's really very welcoming and supportive. It's everyone wants to learn and support each other. And really with a shared love for teaching and for and for students. That's another piece that I see with teaching conferences that I don't see a lot with research conferences. Students rarely show up in the conversation outside of, how are you, managing your research students, and how are they, supporting your data collection and timelines for publications and things like that. Whereas with the teaching conference, there's just this passion and love for the student and their experience in the college environment or grad environment as an individual, and what can we do to support them in their next stages. So yeah, it's just very friendly, not saying, I mean, I have some great colleagues. So I don't want to.
Of course. Yeah, no.
That, but it's very welcoming. It's much smaller. You get to experience more of the conference, whereas a lot of the biomedical research conferences, there's such a vast array of ways to explore the brain. So any neuroscience-based conference is just an explosion of different fields, and you end up in your little silos of the people who do your type of research. But even that silo can be quite large. But with my limited experience with teaching conferences, I will say I felt I wanted to go to everything. I did not feel burnt out at the end of the day. Yeah. I wanted more of it.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I do. And for those, if anybody's listening who's never been to a teaching conference before, NITOP is usually beginning of January. We've got Society for the Teaching of Psychology. They have their annual conference on teaching every October. And then there's lots of others. And you can contact me if you need a list of those. Because now there's online teaching conferences too, which is like shaped. I mean, I guess, the pandemic shaped the way that we do things, but what did your other world do with the pandemic, and did they move things to online at all, or how's that working?
Yeah, so it was a lot of hybrid conferences. Most of them ended up being hybrid, so there was some in-person component, but a large shift to also having a hybrid component where people can not only attend, but also present entirely virtually. Those work, but I always prefer in person, especially with heavily science conferences, because there's just so much networking and a lot of what we gain. I mean, we can read each other's papers. We all know the details, unless there's late breaking, data. It's nice to be able to walk up to people and talk to them, about their, what they find exciting about what they just presented, and all the nuances.
What's your little silo in neuroscience? Because I'm going to tell you, I come out of counseling psych, and so we're going to speak different languages here. But maybe tell me, or even as a person who teaches some neuroscience stuff, kind of on a at a 100, 200 level. What's exciting right now in your world? Just kind of keeping up with what's going on in neuroscience.
I think for me, in my world, my little silo, the most exciting thing is the rapid shift towards exploring differences in the male and female brain across many biological phenomena. And I started off doing rodent research when I pursued my PhD, and all of the rats that I studied were male. And one of the first questions that I brought to my advisor was, why do we only study male rats? I mean, it was not only in my lab, but across multiple labs who use mice and voles primarily use male rats. And through that curiosity, I began to explore the literature and was surprised to see that in my particular area of neuroscience, the neurobiology of fear, emotion, learning, and memory, only about 2% of all of papers that existed at the time that I was in grad school actually studied the female brain. And that was, I hate to count how long ago that was, but in that time, there has been massive transformation at the level of, large external funding agencies like the National Institutes of Health recently mandated that all research that's funded by them they have to justify not the exclusion of female bodies, whether it be the brain or tissue, or even in clinical work and human work. And so if there's no justification, you won't get funded. So it's sort of pushing to expand more research, looking at both sexes, or even one sex, but also considering the other sex in the interpretation in the process. So to me, that's the most exciting. Students, as I teach neuroscience, I find that bringing that up helps guide them into buying into learning about the brain. That's one of the first sort of myths that I like to put up as a sort of like, how can we think about how we've historically thought about neuroscience, and understanding the differences between male and female brain and how that shows up in mental illness and all the things we know about, even in, the broader fields of psychology and cognition and mental health. How does really making sure that we're examining both sexes influence all of that and how you think about your learning?
Have you heard that there is a brand new edition of the Introductory Psych book by Sarah Grisson, Stephen Chu, and Ebony Glover? There are new authors on the title, and if you want to take 15 minutes to explore it, W.W. Norton will give you a $15 gift card. Steve's a cognitive scientist, Ebony is a neuroscientist, and they are joining this Grisson title, and it features built-in study skills and interactive simulations that are designed by Chu and Glover, all within a framework grounded in the science of learning. That means that your students are not only learning psychology, they're learning how to learn. So we can spend our class time sharing our love of psychology with our students and not remediating their study skills. Check it out again for a self-guided tour for 15 minutes and claim your $15 gift card at intropsych.wwnorton.com/psych sessions.
And it also opens the door to not just sex differences, but also other areas that have been historically understudied, such as, different people from different cultures show up in research studies in different ways. And sometimes the findings are different based on their background, based on, but if most of our research is centered on sort of the Western male, typically white male body, we're excluding a lot of people's experiences, not only as research data points, but also the people who choose to go into the field. Being able to see yourself, as someone who could be a neuroscientist or be a psychologist, is really important that we really expand our ideas about what is acceptable as good data, but also as a good researcher behind the data.
That's so helpful to hear. I hope we can dive into a little bit more of that and in your story. And but before we get there, I want to ask, what is the reason why male rats were generally used?
The consensus that I was given back then was that the female body and the female physiology is very complicated due to the cycling reproductive, system, biological reproductive system that cycles. And so depending on what time the female subject is being studied, whether it be a human or a rat who's on an estrous cycle or a menstrual cycle, the behavior could be very, very different. And so in order to get what we would call clean data, or data that was consistent, you would have to basically mainly study male rats, because their data, in large part, was a lot more stabilized because of the hormonal fluctuation was more stabilized. And so when they did study female animals, oftentimes they would remove the ovaries just to, before you did anything else, you remove the ovaries to eliminate that cycle so that the behavior could be more stabilized. But you're missing a huge, chunk of information about, how whatever you're measuring, whether it's drugs, whatever, how those effects actually affect those different cycles or how it changes across a cycle, rather than studying that, it was like, let's exclude that because it's messy and it takes longer and it's, easier to study the male brain. And it really was that simple. And that persisted for most of, all of the data points that we have about what we know about the brain and about the body.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I hadn't thought about it before, but it doesn't surprise me, but it's also really troubling, right? And it signifies some other ways that we might approach research, which you're talking about now with like men and women and differences. And wow, there's a lot there. You know what? Next time I see you at a conference, I want to have a deeper conversation about that in particular, because I think you probably have a lot of thoughts about it, and we can get into them here too. But
yeah, well, be careful what you wish for, because once you get me talking about that, I may, you may have a hard time breaking away.
Well, we might circle back. Well, I'll look forward to it. Now, what should folks who are teaching students about neuroscience, and maybe even at the kind of undergraduate level, and not teaching neuroscience majors, feature majors, or whatever, what is important for them to know about sex differences these days between the male and female brain?
I think the most important thing to bear in mind is that with every fact that we've accepted in the canons and in our textbooks, we have to consider if those facts or whatever the behavioral phenomenon is it going to show up the same when you're considering a male or a female, and not just biologically but socially as well. Especially when you get into things like abnormal psychology and you think about the effects of stress on behavior. Stress is a huge area of research that is finding that women respond to stress very differently than men. And when you're teaching things like the stress axis, the stress response system, if you're teaching things about our autonomic nervous system, our sympathetic nervous system, how our body reacts to, stressors in our environment, be open-minded to consider what does the research say about the human, but consider, is that always the case for every human? And a lot of the textbooks, especially those intro textbooks, are still very late to meet that challenge. So oftentimes students are still learning about sort of the historical approach of how we talked about those facts, those concepts. And so I like to introduce these alternatives and sort of spark these thoughts, and then we kind of dig into some alternative literature that may not be represented in the text, but give them an opportunity to consider that just because something is written in the textbook in 2025 does not mean that it's the most updated, and it doesn't mean that it's true for you or true for the people that you know. And so to really approach your learning with a curiosity. And I find that students, it really this is the piece where I kind of get them a buy-in. They start to buy into the content and want to know more. And that's how I catch them. That's how I grab them and start teaching them concepts. That's when I start teaching about neural communication. Okay, let's talk about action potentials. Now that we've, now that you're interested in your brain, your mother's brain, your friend's brain, so yeah. So I really think approaching teaching neuroscience, not just as it relates to sex differences, but just really the human difference, approaching it and allowing students to see that their brain, when they're learning about the brain, they're learning about their own brain, and to tap into that. And they're learning about the brains of the people that they know and love, and really consider what that means when you're memorizing, vocabulary words.
Hey everyone, Garth here. Thanks for listening to Psych Sessions. If you could go to wherever you listen to our podcast and you would follow that podcast or like it, it really does help us as we are trying to get out to more teachers of psychology. Also, if you haven't checked out our website, please visit psychsessions.org and sign up for our monthly newsletter. We offer free resources and valuable news that you are going to want to know related to the teaching of psychology. Thanks. APA Publishing wants to give you 15% off your order. If you teach classes like counseling, clinical psychopathology, or multicultural psychology, then this is for you. APA Publishing has books that are written by experts that are grounded in evidence and really help teachers. I'll give you a couple of examples. There's a book they have right now called Helping Skills. It's in its 6th edition, and it gives students clear practical frameworks for understanding and learning counseling techniques. It's perfect for hands-on practice and skill development. Here's another one. Cultural Humility helps students build self-awareness and engage meaningfully across diverse identities and experiences. So head to apa.org because they want to give you 15% off your order today using code PS15. That's capital P, capital S, 15. Go check out APA Publishing. It's so interesting to hear your teaching strategy. I love a good hook. Like, I like it in my classroom. I like it when I am marketing something that I'm doing in terms of a conference or whatever. I like it when I'm sending an email because I really want people to read it. But it sounds like you have this system of kind of getting students like interested in it, like authentically interested. So you're not starting with lecture and concepts and you got to get through this. It's I'm going to hook them first. When did you figure that out with students?
It sort of came about organically, and then it became sort of a conditioned process for me because I started noticing this shift, this mindset shift in students, where you can almost pinpoint that moment where their mind shifts from sort of just like, I don't know. This is talking about neuroscience. I'm not a brain person. This is biology stuff. I'm not really into biology. And them having that sort of insecurity and lack of confidence coming in, and they're not really connected to it. But then seeing that shift into a real curiosity and where you see the students are now like interested, like they want to know more. They're asking questions. They become engaged. They're not on their phones. They're talking to you. They're talking to other students around them. They're talking about their lives. They're talking about their experiences. And seeing that shift taught me to let me do more of that. And so that they actually conditioned me to now I just do it naturally. It's how, and I approach it in almost every class. I started off the semester that way. I kind of scaffold my entire semester beginning sort of in the first few lectures, not diving into the content, but really exploring the student. But I also, as I dive into content, I also start the class with that same approach. Like, let's just connect first. What are you feeling about this? Like, even for example, when I teach about the autonomic nervous system, I like to tap into like letting students feel their emotions. And so I do these active learning exercises where I will bring in sort of like stressful experiences, whether it be like having a student do a math operation task while the whole class is watching them. And then I hook these sensors on them that we can watch on the screen, their arousal levels, their skin conductance in real time. And that hooks them because it allows them to see, okay, your autonomic nervous system can be measured by a peripheral response that's happening in your body in real time, and we can observe it. And it can change when a person is stressed. I'll do things like I'll clap really loud while they're doing it, and you'll see it, jump. And then we talk about like what happened, when they got that clap. Let's talk about the neural connections. It started off in the auditory, part of the temporal lobe, and then that went to what part of the brain, through the thalamus, through the amygdala, and we just kind of do it that way. And so by the end of the class, they've learned about these, anatomical areas and their functions. And they're not even thinking that they're learning it. They're observing and watching this and just seeing their excitement about it, like their laughter. They laugh when they see it, like it's funny. The student is flustered and they're like, it's very interesting. And so that sort of has been, I love that. And so I've created a lot of these. Sometimes they're really short. Sometimes they take 30 minutes or longer. Sometimes I use entire class time just to have fun with a topic, and then we'll learn about it a little bit more in the next class as a lecture.
Well, I don't know what's happening with everybody else's systems right now, but I can feel my heart start to race a little bit because I'm excited. I get so excited when I hear a good classroom demo, because I can imagine my students just having fun and this introduction to learning, or this on-ramp to the actual learning, is the way that we can approach teaching, right? Like, I love what you do. Anyway, so I'm thinking, I want to see you give a talk on this somewhere. It would be so cool to hear, here are 4 classroom kind of strategies for teaching, neuroscience to your students. If you ever want to do that, I would attend, I promise. So, yeah.
Well, you're in luck.
Oh, okay. Are you doing a webinar?
Will you be attending NITOP?
I'm on the fence. Should I come? Everybody says I should come.
I am presenting.
Okay, great.
I am presenting. The talk that I'm giving is more related to course-based undergraduate research experiences. Uh-huh. So it's how I bring research to the classroom. So one of the things, as you know, I'm primarily a biomedical researcher, and a lot of my work is centered around teaching research and the research experience. But I really love teaching, and I love being in the classroom. So my approach to integrating those things is what I'm talking about in this presentation at NITOP, is how I can bring research into the classroom, and classroom up to 35 to 40 students or so, and how you can get students to really, as they're learning the content, so whatever content-based course, they're also creating research experiences at the same time, and it's all in the same course. So these are not students who are part of my research lab. These are not students who are trying to get research experience to get into graduate school. These are students that are enrolled in a course, and they get to have these research projects, and many of my students end up presenting them, and they leave the classroom with products that they take on to, pursue other things with. So I am going to give that talk. You just missed, I did a webinar just this past Tuesday talking about empowering students through neuroscience education. And I talk about a lot of the active learning exercises.
Oh, I RSVP'd for that talk, but I knew I was going to be in class during it. So I saw it come through. It did say, please RSVP. We will send you the recording. So I'll definitely check it out. So yeah, this is so cool that you're getting this stuff out there. And you have this spirit of a teacher, the spirit that we really identify at these conferences. And so anyway, it's so cool to hear you talk about your passion and your skill at teaching these students. Okay. So my brain was going to other places, but I feel like I'm not quite done with this part of the conversation. So while I speak and buy myself some time, I know what I was going to say. Oh my goodness. Individual differences. Okay. So can we trust? Well, we learn things in psychology in groups, right? Basically, that's how we learn a lot. How much nuance is? I have a teaching question and then a research question. So here's the research question: is it fair for us to put men and women together in groups and then to test something psychologically or some sort of like an experiment, an intervention or something like that? That's the first question. Could you just give your thoughts on that?
So when you say put them in groups, or you mean all in one?
All together, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, so I think it really depends on what question you're asking and what you're seeking to find, what theory you're basing your experiment on. I say that because, as a group of humans, we all have so many individual differences, right? And anytime you put a bunch of humans in a group, you're going to get a lot of variability. The question is, to what extent is the variability beyond, what you're like trying to ask? And is that variability going to interfere with the results? And if you don't account for that variability, how are you interpreting those results? And are you considering these individual differences in your interpretation? So, even when it comes down to the male versus the female brain, while there are, differences as it relates to certain phenomena, overall, if you look at the biology, it's not that different. Our brains aren't hugely different, so we're still very much human. We still share a lot of human characteristics, but even between one male and another male, there could be so many differences just based on their background, their experiences, their genetic makeup, that could exceed a difference that you may see between a male and a female.
Yeah. Well, the follow-up question is more of a classroom question. When we're dealing with students, you teach undergraduates, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Primarily.
Okay. Yeah, primarily. Okay. So when we're dealing with students who are just kind of learning this world, we know how hard it is for them to kind of get their heads around how research is done in psychology and how we know things to be true. How do you scaffold learning about research without overwhelming them about the nuance of the research? Like, okay, so yes, this is how research works. You kind of have to make it kind of binary, like as simple as possible. And this is how we find out truth. But also there's all this nuance and you got to take into consideration all the things that you just explained, basically. How do you do that with students?
I throw them in the water and watch them struggle to swim, and then I help them figure out how to swim as they go. I think about you learn, the best way to learn research is to do research. And I'm not going to take the time to give you a lecture on all the ways that research can go and all the different things to consider. Let's start with, what are you interested in? What concept would you like to explore? Let's look at some literature and figure out what others have said about it. And now that you have found something you're interested in, the literature isn't as scary because now that literature is tied to something that you're super invested in. We're not exploring all literature. We're just going to look at this. Now, let's consider, what are some of the people saying about what's missing in the literature? Do you think you might be able to address that? And students, when you tell them that they can address a gap in the literature, like that blows their mind. And when they realize how easy it is to do that, like there's so much space out there for you to explore a different way. Even if you do a replication, but like tweak something in the replication, it's that you're adding something. And then we just dive in. Like things come up and then you learn as you go. Like one of the things that I'm doing now is I'm teaching cognitive psychology, and with their research projects, they're using Psych Toolkit, which is a resource that allows them to develop, create experiments and do these, different experiments that are already set up. And they're learning that, you have to put some time in to learn how to use those resources. And so there's videos for that. I'm not going to lecture you about Psych Toolkit. If you choose to explore that as a tool for your research, you don't have to, but if that's the choice you want to make, here's a bunch of videos on it. It takes about 10 to 30 minutes. Sometimes it takes an hour to master this particular thing. if you want to put that time in, here's the resource. But I don't teach it to everyone because someone else may choose to do something. I have a student who's doing a podcast for their research project, and they want to know if students who see a podcast about the ADHD and the experience of ADHD, could that enhance their awareness of what others are facing with ADHD? You know, like, and you're learning as you go. It's like we just kind of keep going, like, okay, how do I measure this? If I want to know the effectiveness of this, okay, well, let's get you a Qualtrics account, let's explore it, go try to make a survey, see what they've done, play with it, it's intuitive, and then come to me for questions.
Yeah,
so I just throw them in.
I really like that. I like how you support them. I also like what you are sort of demanding of them, right? And for them to figure it out. So yeah, cool.
And they love it. They love figuring it out. That's the part that they love. They don't love learning about it in front of, on a PowerPoint or in a textbook.
Yeah.
They love learning about it because they're trying to figure out a problem that they have to solve to get this project going.
Totally. Yeah. It seems to me like you sidestep a lot of AI problems too, like with this approach,
Oh, yeah. That for sure. Yeah. Because it's forcing them to engage and it's their project. So you can't, AI is not going to have the same, passion behind it that they do.
Yeah, that's great. What is your day-to-day look like at Kennesaw? What do you do Monday through Friday? How many classes do you teach? All those kinds of things.
So currently I teach 3 classes, one hybrid. So we meet on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then the rest of it is hybrid. And then I teach 2 fully online courses. And so my days are typically the days that I teach, I give those mornings exclusively to those courses. And so I kind of just start off and just do a lot of prep because that course, the in-person is at noon. So I have all morning to kind of play with it. And also because we're in the midst of projects, I spend a lot of that time. Some students are submitting IRB proposals, and many students have submitted their poster for presenting we have a symposium of student scholars at Kennesaw State University. So I'm meeting with them. Sometimes I have one-on-one meetings with them, but ultimately I'm usually going through their emails, reading their proposals, certifying their IRBs, grading, because as part of their grade, they have to work through an abstract. So I walked them through how to set up an abstract from start to finish, and then they come up with a final abstract. And so just usually I'm grading and sort of designing. I don't like to give lectures in person. I usually create those on virtually, and I record them so that we can spend time in person answering questions, doing active things, active learning. And it's if you want to, follow a lecture, it's online. You can see the video. And then, so on those days that I'm not in person teaching, I am typically also, I have multiple manuscripts that I'm juggling right now. I am sitting on way too much data that I've collected over the years as part of my biomedical research world. So I try to balance that as well. So I'm, working on those manuscripts, meeting with collaborators. So that's usually the latter part of my week, working through getting those products out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a lot of grading, paper, manuscripts, emails. Yeah.
How has you're in mid-career now, right?
Yeah.
How has that changed? Because it seems to me, as a person also in mid-career, that something shifted around that time where I started to get to, in an early career, I think you're doing a lot of stuff out of necessity. You feel like I've got to do this stuff. And then you get into this mid-career point, you're like, oh, I've got some choice in what I do. How are you navigating that right now? Are you doing are you able to say no? You good at that?
Wow, that's a great question. In fact, that's a very timely question because I recently have made a choice to step back from my biomedical research life to where I wanted to, that's why I'm teaching 3 courses this semester. I typically have a smaller teaching load because I was running, 2 federally funded research projects. And so I've recently decided that I want to return back to my first love of being in the classroom and spend some time there for a while. And as it relates to my biomedical research, I'm more a supportive role in the grants, and rather than being a co-investigator who's out on the ground and actively collecting data. I now have sort of stepped back in more consultancy and working on sort of like, what do we do with these data? So like manuscript prep and things like that. And so that was very difficult. And it has been it's like turning a giant ship around, because the way I showed up, or the way I show up as a, academic in my biomedical research life is very different than how I show up with a mostly teaching-centered academic life. And it has been difficult, but it has been so rewarding to return, because that's really my first love. And I even came to my institution for that reason. I left an R1, heavily research. I was in a school of medicine, and I came to Kennesaw State University, which had an R2 designation, and with the idea that I want to do research, but I really love teaching. I want to be able to do them both in a balanced way. Yeah. But then when I got to Kennesaw, I kind of just took off with the research. And I felt like my teaching was it was more about teaching research. And so now I'm sort of doing both in a more balanced way. And I had to say no to a lot of things. And I had to, I actually ended up not renewing a grant when I could have, went up for renewal. I made a choice to say, you know what, I'm going to step back from running this grant, from being a PI on this major grant. I would like to get back into the classroom, shore up my teaching. Teaching is a lot of work, and the scholarship of teaching, I'm finding myself to be very passionate about, and I really want to explore that. I actually see the next phase of my career building my expertise there in the scholarship of teaching.
Wow. Well, we're so happy to have you.
Thank you. I love it here.
Kennesaw has this rich history of teachers, psych teachers who even sort of founded some of these conferences and have been heavily involved in STP. It's a really cool river to step into, and to continue on. So
I'm very lucky.
Yeah, that's really neat. So yeah, you are doing some different things now. I am aware that you are now, you're writing. Have you written a textbook before? Have you been part of a textbook before?
Never have I been a part of a textbook before. This has been quite an experience.
All right. Well, tell people what's going on, because I think it's just so cool. When I heard the news, it was just so fun for me to hear that. So go ahead.
So I am now a contributing author, a co-author on Psychology in Your Life, going into the 5th edition. Previously with Sarah Gerson and Michael Gazanaga. Now it's 3 of us now: Sarah, Stephen Chu, and myself. So it's super exciting and has certainly informed a lot of my sort of approach now to how I approach my career and my scholarship, as well as my love for teaching, and it's helped renew my passion for teaching.
Did you have to fight for that neuroscience chapter, or?
Not at all. That I was sort of designated pretty early on as the neuroscience chapter would be sort of my baby. I would be leading that chapter. And I absolutely loved that challenge. Because I've always taught neuroscience courses as an entire course. So physiological psychology, I've taught brain and behavior at other institutions, and other facets of that chapter as a whole course, like psychopharm and things like that. But to put it into one chapter and firstly, I would say the previous editions of Psychology in Your Life did a fantastic job with that chapter. So coming in to sort of, help revise that chapter and, augment it in ways to make it more engaging, more inclusive, more understandable, more easy for students from all walks of life, as well as teachers from different backgrounds to use this material and learn it, and also apply it across the entire textbook. Yeah. Because it's such a important chapter. So it was a great challenge. I loved it. And I'm very proud of what we were able to do with the 5th edition. I'm excited about.
Yeah. So Sarah is, I don't mean to like pigeonhole her or anything like that, but maybe a generalist, right? I mean, that's when I talked to her, and I think when you're a textbook author for an intro psych book, you kind of have to be, right?
Yeah.
And then they brought Steve on, who's a cognitive psychologist, and then you're this neuro piece. It's kind of a dream team. It's kind of fun to think about.
It feels like a dream team. I love our team. I love it. Yeah, Sarah's amazing. She's done such a great job with this textbook so far. One of the hardest things I would say coming on to this team is when I first read the textbook, my first thought was, oh my God, this is perfect. Like what? This is such a great textbook. Like I absolutely fell in love with the textbook. And then I had never met Stephen Chu before. And when I got to, engage with him in this project, I mean, he, as you know, he is absolutely amazing. And his knowledge about the science of learning, of teaching, and how to study and how to learn, and that Sarah brings that with such expertise using evidence-based, things, bringing evidence-based tools to this textbook for teachers as well as students and for their success. I at first felt like, okay, I don't know how I could I don't know what more I can bring to this, but given that I have such a lot of experience with active learning, with teaching difficult concepts around the biological basis of psychology, and using all kind of tools to help, bring that into the students' framework. I was able to bring that to the textbook, which I think really gives it an edge that it didn't. Other textbooks don't have.
Wow, so cool. How's the workload been? Is it a more or less or about what you thought to do something like that?
Oh, absolutely more than I could have ever imagined. Is the learning curve. I feel like I feel like I just went through graduate school again. Because you don't know, you just don't know what you don't know. And so each turn, every meeting, every week, every month, there's something new that I'm learning about not only the process of writing a textbook, but the publishing world, working with the editors and the media team and copy editors and developmental. I'm just learning jargon, the process of promotion, going out there and talking to people about the textbook. Like, it's so many different facets of this job that you don't know until you go through it. So I'm excited that I get to continue, that it's not just a one-off, like now I have a folder for 6E, for the 6th edition. And almost daily, I kid you not, I mean, I'll be in the car, I'll be, in the kitchen and in the shower, and I'll think of something. It's too late to put it in 5E. Like, that ship has sailed, but oh my God, let's put this in 6E. And I'm just as excited about the next edition now that I've had this institutional knowledge, not only of the textbook itself, but of, the publishing world. Now that I'm back in the teaching world more deeply, the ideas are coming to me all the time. So I'm really excited about the future of psychology in your life, not just 5E, but 6E and beyond.
Oh, that's when you know you're like on the path, right? When that kind of stuff is happening for you. So I don't know, people can't see you in this audio format, but you're smiling the whole time while you're explaining all that. So that's pretty cool. So when is 5E out yet, or is it coming out soon?
It's not out yet. It's in the end stages. And I think it's set to be published in 2026. I think I don't want to be incorrect in this, but I think the ebook will be coming out first in the first part of 2026, and then the textbook later in 2026.
Wow. Cool. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I want to just circle back, because we are kind of getting close to our time together. I want to circle back because I've just heard you talk about teaching so much, and I want to learn from you where you were inspired to teach. So like, I have like a very specific question, which is like, how did you learn that active learning was a great way to learn? But then I have a broader question of like, who were the people? What were the experiences that kind of made you want to go into academia, made you want to teach and love teaching? So you can take that kind of wherever you want.
Yeah, so it actually happened when I finished my PhD. My first postdoctoral fellowship was through it was a program called FIRST, Fellowships in Research in, I want to say student teaching. Teaching is in there somewhere. I don't know what the S, I can't remember what the S stood for. But the way it worked was they would take an R1 institution like Emory University, which is where I was housed, and then pair researchers with institutions in the surrounding areas that were not as research focused, but were more teaching focused. And many of them were like in our HBCUs, our historically Black colleges and universities around Atlanta. So Spelman College, Morehouse College, Clark Atlanta University. And they would pair the students who were at, the postdocs who were at Emory and these Research One labs with a teacher at one of these smaller universities, and they would mentor us on teaching, and we would teach some of their courses or be teaching assistants. When most R1 institutions, when they have postdoctoral fellowships, teaching is not an expectation. It's not appreciated. In fact, sometimes we are admonished from teaching because it takes away from the research. When you're a postdoc, you're here to, learn how to run a lab and have your own research, lab. You're not here to teach. So it was a great postdoctoral experience because that was the first time I actually got to be an instructor of record, and to begin teaching in the classroom. And then they also offered workshops. So that's when I first started seeing, like, being trained how to teach, like no one had ever taught me, or I didn't even know there were strategies for teaching, for that matter. I just thought you got a PhD and then they put you in a classroom and you figured it out. Yeah. But these workshops, and so that's where it began. That's when I started to pick up the nuggets. I started, I saw these workshops. I saw how these small liberal arts colleges were approaching teaching, and being in those classrooms really sparked something in me. And once that, it's like it's catching. And once that spark happened, I could never break away from teaching. So that's why I chose to go to Kennesaw, because at the time I had many opportunities I could have remained at Emory University as a research faculty, where I would primarily conduct externally funded research. I had opportunities elsewhere, but I even took a pay cut. Fun fact, I was making more money as a postdoc with doing some teaching on the side than my offer was to go to Kennesaw. But I said, you know what? I want to do this. It'll pay off in the long run. And it has. It's been an amazing experience. So yeah, that's the long story.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm sure there's so much in there. So you were an undergraduate at Spelman, right?
Yes. Yep.
Did you ever meet Karen Brocky while you were there?
Yeah, she was the chair of our department of psychology when I was an undergraduate student in psychology. She was my chair.
Oh my goodness. I was reading through your bio and I was like making all these connections to STP, to our little world, right? So yeah, it's really, really cool how that all comes full circle. Yeah, so you have a lot going on. Like, what do you predict? What does the next couple of years look like for you? Just stay in the classroom. You're going to teach a 3-3 load. You're going to write a text or contribute on a textbook and do some research.
Yeah, I'm figuring out this 3-3 load. Like I will say it has been a little bit of a struggle getting back to, first being in the classroom, again, because most of the classes I taught, with my research heavy load were largely capstone type courses where they were a lot of one-on-one, much smaller courses. So I'm really loving this life. And so I'm happy to continue this path for, as long as it still feels good. And I feel like the contributing to a textbook while being in a more teaching heavy workload works together really well. I don't know how people write textbooks and run like large research projects. Because I love teaching so much, I just want to dive into the teaching because the textbook, especially for intro, it just takes you there. You can't be in an intro textbook. Like when I say be in, I'm talking about like every dot, every T, every figure caption, every definition, like everything. When you're in it like that, you're thinking about the student the whole time. So it's very hard for me to move from that space and then go back into a biomedical research lab. And like, we're thinking about data and I want to stay with the students. So I'm enjoying this process.
Yeah. I love how you explain crossing every T and dotting every I. It's funny that when you take on a writing project like that, they kind of just like, do you want to be an author on this thing? And then they kind of slow roll all these steps and phases and all these other skills that you're going to develop.
That's exactly true. Like no one knows what that being an author on a textbook means until you're in it. That's why I do that to my students. You just throw them in there. You throw them in the water and they'll figure it out.
I love it. Ebony, it has been such a pleasure having this conversation with you. And man, I think I'm going to look hard at making that NITOP trip. And I would love to see your talk. So thank you for chatting today. It was so good to get to know you a little bit better.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.